Hello and welcome to Disc Dandies, a podcast where each episode, two friends share a recommendation with one another. We talk about what we liked, what we would change, and try not to judge each other too much over our bad tastes. This week, we go on a woeful errand, but are not going to get sad about it.
Do you think Ainsworth is a himbo?
That's a really weird question to ask about my son.
But I just need to know. Okay, look, you send me pictures of him. He's looking cute. He's sitting in boxes and all that stuff. I'm just saying, he's not looking that smart.
Oh, but okay, so you're saying he doesn't look very smart, but he's beautiful.
Just stray out of the gate with insulting your cat. That's the kind of podcast we're doing here.
Well, okay. So the thing about himbo is it's a insult with a compliment attached to it, because you're saying that he's got poo brain, but he's a good looking cat, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely gorgeous every time I see him.
Okay, if we're following that criteria, then yes, Ainsworth is a himbo.
Yes. We are a pro himboification podcast. I just want to make sure everyone's aware of that.
Yeah, no himbo shaming here.
Yeah. So how you doing, Jordan? We're recording at a kind of weird time for us. We don't normally record on this day, but so how are you doing today?
Yeah, typically we save this day for worship and silent remembrances of our mistakes. Mm-hmm. But today we're doing a podcast about video games. How I'm doing is I'm a little tired. I had a weird night, dream and doggo wise. But I got a nap in, so I'm feeling much better than I did when I woke up this morning. Plus, I got a good fresh can of strawberry bubbly, so I think I'm in pretty good shape. What about you, Will?
I'm doing okay. I've got my just two beverages today. I got my old coffee that has gone lukewarm many hours ago, and I've got some mandarin orange fizzy water going. Hey, why don't you give us an update on the puppy situation? How are it's been a couple of weeks now. Is the puppy like fully acclimated now? Happy to be in his forever home, or her forever home?
To your first question, I will say that she is acclimated, but not she's definitely still on the learning curve end of things. She's like in that bitey phase right now, where she is still kind of learning how to like socialize and how, like, at what level to be playing. So she could stand softening up a little bit. I got a good little bite mark on my hand as a result. But other than that, I think she's pretty happy. We have been making a strong attempt to spoil her and shower her in treats and toys. And she has at least one little girl in this household who is very doting and constantly caring for her. So I think she's in good shape mentally.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good. Glad to hear it.
At least Phoebe, our elderly cat, I don't think that she has acclimated to the puppy. She would rather the puppy not exist.
This is the cat that your new puppy is treating like a lollipop, right?
Yeah, she's licking that toilet O-ring, if you know what I mean. She's going after it.
Grody.
Yeah. I believe you have a question for me, Will.
I do, yeah. I've been thinking about this a lot recently, and I've got to ask. So, we're gamers, right? We are very well versed in, that RPG trope where you're given a very powerful one-time only use item, and you never use it. You save it because you always need to save it for, like, the most important boss battle, or, like, the time when you absolutely really need it. And in consequence, you never use it, and you end the game, and you move on to other games, and you never used the really good item. So I want to know, what is your real life elixir? What is the item in real life that you hang on to, but you end up never using it because you never find that exact right moment to do so?
Okay, I have the perfect answer for this. And I've done a really good job of it. Well, actually, I consumed a couple of these elixirs this past week, kind of going against this. But normally, I have a really difficult time eating bananas, which I love. Like there was one week I even told Tristan, I said, can you get some bananas? I was reading a thing about how like bananas are a good like weight loss tool because it's about how filling they are as a treat or like breakfast item, and you know, good source of potassium. We all know that. Well, she got a nice little like stock of bananas, you know, looking nice and ripe and beauteous. I did not eat a one. I completely forgot about them, and it goes that way every time with them. I love it. They're probably like their top 3 favorite fruits, if not my favorite. And they always like go to spoil because of me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Hate bananas. You will never catch me eating a banana. No, thank you.
Is it because it's like a phallic object and you're scared of them?
No, I just hate the taste. It's just one of those things, you know, you have those things, you know, that just like no matter what, no matter how good you think the flavor might be mixed in with some other things or anything like that, it's just something about the taste of bananas just goes deeply against my, you know, sensibilities. I'm going to push back a little bit on this. How can bananas be an elixir when they have a expiration date? If it has an expiration date, I think it technically doesn't fall under the definition of something that you could just hang on to until you never use it, right?
Well, technically, my man, everything has an expiration date, right?
Yeah, I guess so. That's very deep, but we're going to have to think about that.
What about you? What is your elixir?
Okay, I know my answer to this. It's Magic cards. You know, Magic the Gathering, we know it, we love it, we hate it. I remember when Double Masters came out about this time last year, and I was doing the same thing that every other Magic player was doing. It was like, cards, no one's playing Magic in person, so paper Magic cards are lower in price. So that means I need to buy all the Magic cards that I could ever possibly need. Double Masters came out, and I thought, oh, this is great. Manamorphose is coming out. Voice of Resurgence coming out. Dark Confidant is getting a reprint. Goblin Guide's getting a reprint. So I definitely spent a lot more money than I should have during a pandemic on Magic cards that I have yet to actually play with, put in a deck. They literally are just sitting in the box since I bought them. And you know what? Honestly, I don't even feel that bad about it. It was definitely, in my mind, the correct thing to buy these cards, even though I'm probably not going to play paper Magic for a very long time. So yeah, Magic cards are definitely the thing that I need to have, but will never use.
Okay, yeah, as long as we're pushing back on elixir definitions, I think another prerequisite of an elixir is that it has to be useful.
Are Magic cards useful? Man, we're asking all the philosophical questions today, aren't we?
To answer your question, no, Magic cards are not useful. They bring joy and happiness, but I think we could probably like go to our girlfriends for this one.
Honestly, I would push back against them being giving us happiness like that. In my experience, that has not been the case.
Why are we doing this to ourselves?
Well, suffering, the virtue in suffering. That's the whole thing. That's my thing.
Okay, well, I think I know something else that made you suffer this week. If our precursory like conversations have had anything to say about it, we played Superbrothers Sword and Swocery.
I want to be clear about some things here. I think there are good parts of this game, and I very much want to share what I liked out of this game. You know, when we decided to start this podcast, we were talking about what kind of tone we wanted to take, and we decided we wanted to find the good in anything that we played. And I definitely have good things to say about this game. But I mean, just to jump ahead before you give your spiel, I really didn't enjoy this game. There were a lot of bad parts about it too, and I'm looking forward to speaking about those as well. But yeah. So we played Superbrothers Sword and Swocery. Why don't you tell us a little bit about this game, Jordan?
Yeah, and just as a clarification too, Will, you're totally allowed to not like this game and talk about it here. I'm very excited to hear what you didn't like about it.
Oh no, trust me, I am taking the opportunity to not like this game, and I will say things about it. So.
Okay, so for starters, this was released back in 2011, and it was sort of a different game back then. This is something that'll come up, and we'll talk a little bit more about it in the podcast, or like later on in the discussion. But it had a pretty heavy social media integration with Twitter at the time whenever it came out, and it basically it's changed a lot since then, which is one of the main reasons why I wanted to bring this up as an exhortation. In 2021, it is a very different experience than it was back in 2011. It is a point and click adventure game. That is like, if you want to distill all of its parts onto one things, it is exactly that. It has some like rhythm mechanics as far as the combat goes and stuff, but for the most part, it is you are pointing, clicking, collecting items, and finishing a quest. Albeit a little bit stripped down in terms of like the actual mechanical function of the items. They do one thing, you know. It is framed as an interactive album too. Everything is a little musical notey, and there are parts of the game that are like directly basically like stuff like the atmosphere and story are meant to be companion pieces to the music that is playing throughout the game. It is meant to be integrated in that way. And the music was done by Jim Guthrie, who was an indie, I guess, folk artist. I don't know if that's the right genre to put him in.
That's probably correct.
If I say indie music, I think it correctly pigeonholes him.
You know what we're talking about if we say that. Yeah.
It's like a mixture of like acoustic guitar and chiptune music and keyboards and stuff like that. But yeah, he serves as the narrative and atmospheric guide. And he also did all of the sounds for the game, or the majority of the sounds for the game. So like he helped capture like the vocal performances, which are very few, and sound effects in the environment. And he developed, so this was developed in conjunction with Jim Guthrie by Capybara Games, who they've done a couple. They're getting more into the publishing game these days, but their notable other titles I would say are Below and Grindstone. Below was recently released on PC and Xbox as like a kind of Dark Souls-esque like dungeon crawler. I think it has roguelike elements. I'm not sure yet. I haven't gotten to play it myself. And then Grindstone, which is like kind of like a funny Bejeweled spin-off type thing.
I've never heard of either of those games, but I have never been a huge like indie game. Like I've never delved into, done a deep dive into the indie gaming sphere. So I'm not surprised that I don't know any of those games.
Yeah, they're pretty generally beloved in the indie circles, as I've seen. Whether or not their games are successful, they're always trying weird and different stuff. They are a very experimental studio. But with all that out of the way, well, I got to know, what were your impressions going into this, and what were your impressions as you played it? I know you didn't like this. You have made it like pretty clear why. I like open up to me. Tell me what happened.
Sure. Okay. Well, I was excited going into this. Apparently, you had said that this was a bit of an indie darling coming out. Maybe I just wasn't paying attention in 2011. But I had heard the name before, but knew nothing about it. So I didn't know any of the acclaim that this game had. But my impressions on this game soured pretty quickly getting into the game. And honestly, it's not one in particular thing. There's a couple of things going on that are the source of that. But I want to flip this around. So I know that you are into the point and click adventure type thing. So I want to know, how do you feel about this game? And I want to know, like, did you play this when it first came out, or are you a late adopter, so to speak?
Oh no, I played this back in 2011. That was actually around the time that I started on Twitter, back in my blogging days. It was just kind of necessary to be there, and I had a lot of friends on Twitter. And I got on one day and I saw, these like kind of like cryptic, tweets, because the tweets that would come out from the Superbrothers game were plot relevant, but they were like really, what's the word? Like ambiguous. Like they didn't give anything away. They were pretty smartly written. And a lot of it was meant to be like interaction points for other people who were playing the game. And I think that's how the game proliferated, because it sold like a good bit on mobile devices. And it was just like it was like the first exploration of like what at the time was a new social media site in Twitter. And I think Capybara Games in particular just wanted to like kind of see how they could use that social media integration to push the game. And at the time, I really loved this. I like everything about it, the art, the music, like the mood of the game, and like I guess the general like broad strokes of the story I enjoyed. But I've been kind of like side-eyeing it in recent years. I've been wanting to go back to it and check it out again because I heard that they had removed that social media integration, and I wanted to see what that looked like in today. And turns out it actually changed a lot about the game, and it also kind of like warped some of my opinions about the experience too on its own.
I figured that you'd like the game because it was an exhortation, but as I was playing the game, I could see a lot of things that I thought, yeah, Jordan would like this. I could absolutely see this being his type of game. So I definitely knew that this was up your alley when I was playing it.
Yeah, this is... So that's the thing is I loved this game whenever I first played it. I would say this was more of an experimental exhortation rather than something that was... Like, it's been on my mind a lot, like I've been thinking about it because one of my thoughts was that I don't think this game can work without the social media parts. Like, it's not going to work in the same way that it did before. But anyways, I guess let's start digging into the actual like meat of the game if you're ready for that.
Yeah. Please. I had a lot of trouble understanding the story. So I say it over and over on this podcast, anti-intellectual bumpkin. I got raw chicken brain. I did not understand the story, and I need you to give me some direction here.
Yeah, so the story kind of establishes you, and it's not like an exposition heavy game either. Like it's the story's mostly told through little blurbs, and you're like you get this book early in the game, the Monocron.
Megatome.
Thank you so much, Megatome. You get it early in the game, and it's supposed to help you on your journey to collect the pieces of the Trigon, which is supposed to help you on your woeful errand to save the world. It's from the get-go, it's kind of framed as like it hints pretty heavily that you're gonna have some self-sacrifice going on somewhere along in the game, which is like a pretty common theme in video games, really. And you play as the Scythian, who is supposed to be a professionally trained individual in terms of combat. Someone who is like spiritually attuned to the world, but also trained to fight evil forces and stuff. There's not much information about her culture or anything like that, other than the fact that like the blurbs that relate to who she is as a person are that like she was sent on this task to do this thing. And most of the game really like it isn't really too concerned with the story. I think a lot of the story focuses on like you're heading towards like helping people, and also like that part of the game also integrated into the social media element as well. There's a lot of like connecting. I won't say a lot. There is connecting with people in the game between like Logfella and then the girl who lives in the cabin with him, as well as like meeting up with one of the big moments in the game, Jim Guthrie. Well, I'll say big moments, but it's supposed to be a kind of cool symbolic moment for you. I guess this is where like one of the things that have not aged as well in my eyes is that without the social media integration, a lot of these components don't really stick now. They don't have as much context. What are your thoughts on what you did understand? I guess I should ask.
Yeah, so I should mention that I know nothing about the Twitter integration. I saw what was available inside the game, but I have not seen any of the tweets. Did the tweets give you more story about the game that you were expected to know?
I would say it would bring more of your attention to it. Sure.
Okay.
It was one of those things where it was like it would tweet quotes from the game out and stuff like that, but it was like these moments you would be interacting with other people who are playing the game online about these things, and like discussions would happen as a result. Okay. It was very much like you were expected to be talking to people about this game. And that, honestly, like, you not having played the social media part of this is one of the main reasons why I exhorted it to you. Is I was like, I wonder how this plays for someone who hasn't seen them before. You know, like, I wonder, does it land without that integration? And so, for me, as someone who can do the before and after, I was just super interested to see what someone who could only do the after would have thought about it.
Yeah, I would say this game is not too concerned about explaining its story, as you mentioned. It kind of is very clearly laid out. You are on a quest that's going to end up. How spoilery are we getting with this episode?
We're bear it all. Yeah, I think this is a 10-year-old game at this point. I think we could definitely spoil it.
There's really not much story to spoil, but I guess we're going to do it. Here's your spoiler warning for everyone who wants that.
Yeah, I would say there are moments you can spoil, but yeah, I mean, definitely not the story.
This game is very clear. Like, you're on a journey that's going to end with you sacrificing yourself, and it doesn't give you much detail on who you are, why exactly you're doing it, why the tome matters as much as it does, who the specter that's following you that you meet at the beginning of the game, and then at the end. If it does explain some things, it's possible that they are so esoteric that if you don't have any background information, you're not going to pick them up. I'm not sure about that. I would say that this game is definitely more concerned about its vibe and aesthetic. Not that vibe was a word that was being used a lot in 2011, but it's really the feeling. It's the ambiance of the situation that is really more the focus of what's going on. But I do have to say that this is part of why I didn't like the game, is that I felt it was far too sparse with its explanation of why you are doing what you're doing. I have to be honest. I found it very hard to care about what was going on in the story as I was playing. I think we talked about this a little bit when we were talking about the Double Fine Adventure documentary and the game Broken Age. I think they talk a lot about how story is king when it comes to adventure games, and multiple times throughout this game I found myself asking, why do I care about this? And at the end of the game, when the Scythian dies and Logfella's picking her body up out of the water, I just didn't care. The ending really fell very flat for me because at just no point did I care about what was going on.
Yeah, and I think that this is where we're getting into the kind of the subjective territory, mostly because the game is very much like, it's even in the title, it's very much framed as like music, like or they're approaching it like I think one would approach music. There are like general themes and vibes it's trying to capture, but for the most part, like, music is this like largely interpretable like medium. And this is something that's tough too, is because like there's not a lot of interviews to like gather around this game. But I think that, like, to me, one of the goals always is like you were supposed to kind of like interpret a lot from this and like kind of draw your own, like, I guess, emotion from it. And I do think that your points about story being king and stuff like that, I think it does kind of lean into why I don't think this game has aged as well for me. And it's that, especially on a repeat playthrough, you do kind of whenever, especially when like how to do everything, it's tough to really connect with everything that's going on whenever everything is just so like vague, and I think being sparse and vague works contextually depending on the experience. But I think in an adventure game, when your interactions with the game are already so limited, it is important that you have more going on dialogue and story wise than this game did.
Sure. I will say some things I did like about the storytelling aspect of the game is that part of the self-sacrifice and that, you are hurting yourself, you're hurtling towards, your something very bad happening to you, was that after each of the Trigon fights, you would lose your max health. You would go from what is it, 5 stars down to 4, 3, 2, 1 towards the end of the game. During the last section, you start pausing and coughing up some sort of fluid. I felt that was a really good way to illustrate what was happening, and probably the best part of the best like storytelling aspect of this entire game that I enjoyed the most. So props to them for doing that.
Yeah, I also liked, there were some blurbs from her every now and then, from the Scythian every now and then, where she would express kind of like discomfort in continuing this. Like, she pretty generally, she came off as like nonchalant and like, oh yeah, no, I got this. But there are a couple of quotes where she's like, I'm not really vibing with this. This is actually starting to like scare me a little bit, and like, it's, it's like a kind of established that the Scythians, like her culture, like if you talk to the ghosts, I guess I should ask, did you do that, by the way?
I believe there were 2 ghosts that I found. I talked to everything I found, but I only remember talking to 2 ghosts.
Okay, yeah, so there's a conversation you have with one of the ghosts where they kind of shed some more light on the Scythians and stuff. They're very much like duty-bound warriors, and whenever they get sent out on these quests to fulfill, it's very much like it's almost like religious zealotry, and she kind of, well, some of her sentiments push back against that duty, like her just kind of like being like, man, this is kind of scary. And I think that's something that like I really liked too, was just that kind of pushback against the duty, and ultimately I felt like towards the end of the game there were enough hints that she was more doing it for the people there than she was for her Scythian duties. But that, again, that could have been fleshed out more if there was more of that dialogue,
Yeah, I'm not gonna say that I completely missed that. I don't remember. But like, since you're saying that, I don't recall hearing that conversation. So maybe there is stuff inside the game that I missed and does kind of explore some of my gripes with the story. But I think that's a gripe in of itself, right? Is like, if it's that important, why is it hidden? Why would it be possible for me to miss something that important? It's a valid artistic choice, but it kind of leaves some people in the dark and affects the way that they look at the game as a whole.
Well, it kind of goes back to the conversation we had in a previous episode. Like, I think art doesn't have to be necessarily understandable, but it's got to be approachable. You've got to be able to like draw something from it to connect with. And if they make it really difficult to find the things that you can draw those connections, then yeah, it's kind of on the art piece. It's failing on its part, I think.
Sure. Well, let me ask you. I think I mentioned this before. I don't know why it was so important that the main character sacrificed themselves at the end of the game. Do you know why exactly they're having to sacrifice themselves to do anything? Are they saving the world? Are they getting rid of something? To me, it's not very clear as to what the whole point of the sacrifice was.
Okay, yeah, I think you definitely missed some stuff, which again, not like we just established, not really your fault here, because again, they like, you kind of have to go and look for these things, like the graves or the ghosts are. They kind of spell that part out. That ghost, the specter that like you kind of encounter throughout the game, that that ultimately kills you at the end.
The one you awaken.
Yeah, it's. So at one point in the game, you find out about some other travelers that had been coming up the hill because they were also trying to find the Trigons to unite them and all that stuff like that. But they got murdered by that ghost, or the Ghost Guardian, I think is what it's supposed to be called, or something like that. But it ends up, it's this evil presence that is murdering people in that area, more or less.
Okay.
And if you go past that door, it is very dangerous, and it's basically just that, like, you've been sent on this quest as a Scythian. Something I like about this quest is that it's supposed to be small in scale. You're more or less, whenever you say save the world, you're saving these people's world, if that makes sense.
Okay.
And so you're being sent up this. It is your duty as a Scythian to collect these Trigons, which are killing you as you collect them. That, like, the power in them isn't meant to be wielded by you, or something to that effect. And like the act of like joining them is hurting you. And whenever in that last moment of the game, whenever yourself and the Guardian are kind of caught up in the Trigon's like beam, I think the illusion there is either basically both of you are killed by that happening.
Okay. The face is supposed to be Abraham Lincoln, right?
Yes, it is 100%.
Oh, okay, yeah. Whether intentional or not, that is absolutely Abraham Lincoln. Well, yeah, it's possible that there's parts of the story that I did just miss, which is very unfortunate. Yeah. I guess I would say I'm glad that some people enjoyed the story more than I did.
Well, I think I would still. I kind of side with you in the idea that, like, I am fine with putting. I mean, I like Dark Souls. Obviously, I like story bits being put out of the way. But I think that if you're going to do that, you got to give people more tools. I guess you need to do more to make the game kind of like convey what it's going for without you getting all of the bits, you know.
Sure.
And where I feel like games like Dark Souls do that, I do think that this game, unless you specifically go out and find the ghosts, you're not really going to have a good idea of what occurred.
Okay, well, I want to make sure I'm not centering my dislike of the game. So let me ask you, what is your favorite part of the story? And not necessarily favorite moment, but like what aspect of the story did you find very compelling about this game?
Well, I think it's more in the theme sections where I find it more compelling, I think I would say, because I find the story even back in 2011 was just fine. It was just serviceable, and the story and the game itself even kind of like ribs at the story by nonchalantly approaching it. You know, it's more like the act that you're committing that is, I guess, the special thing about the story. And because the entire point of the game is you realize that you're like slowly walking towards your end, and I think that that's something I always liked. And so I guess that could tie into the story a bit, but I just like that you knew it's established from the get-go this isn't going to end well for you, and everything you're doing is slowly bringing you close to that and the fulfillment of that, and the fact that they didn't fake out on that too.
Yeah, we'll talk about this more when we go to themes. That's a good point. Can we take a moment to talk about the use of music inside this game? I do have to say, to give this game the credit that it deserves, this is a very good soundtrack. Jen Guthrie did a great job with the sounds and music of this game, and I'm sure you would agree, right?
I think that this is the game's biggest success, in my opinion, is like the soundtrack and its integration into the game. Like how it's used in the game. It's very thematic and atmospheric, and also just freaking listenable outside of the game. It is so good, and like I don't know, it just seems all very well thought out. Like just a lot of really good melodies and in a lot of different moods and like vibes captured. I think it's all really good.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. I went on Spotify and was listening to the soundtrack just on its own. Very much enjoyed it. Definitely saved some songs. I do want to be a bit more granular with my opinion on this, just to throw it out there. I loved the music. I do not think that it was integrated well into the game. Just to kind of put a point on it, I honestly think that the aesthetic of the music did not fit the game that it was put into. So the music great, but like it's almost like the music was made for a different type of game. And there were definitely some songs where I was like, I like this song, but I really wish a different song was playing during the game.
Yeah, I guess we'll definitely have to like agree to disagree on that one, because I thought it fit perfectly. Like I thought it was a really I thought that it elevated the scenes, and especially like a lot of like the wandering around music. It just kind of the vibe it added to the environments, in my opinion.
Sure, yeah. It definitely would. I just think there's a mismatch in intention there. Do you so let's talk about the title for a bit. Sword and Swocery, and just to be clear, sorcery is spelled like sword. The first part is spelled like sword, and then the rest of it sorcery. So it's a bit of a play on there. But it's called Superbrothers Sword and Swocery EP. You mentioned this a bit before, but it's meant to be in some respects like an interactive album. Part of playing the game is experiencing the music. That's really highlighted by the the fact that the composer, Jim Guthrie, is actually in the game. You meet him just on his own, and then you actually see a concert that he's a part of. That's pretty creative. I can enjoy the design of like having your music composer inside the game.
The experimental part of this thing, like, and how they keep like framing it as experimental. I don't think today many people would find it all that experimental, you know, because there are a lot of games that have like done what this game is doing now. Like this is, which is like integrating melody and like trying to convey atmosphere with gameplay and stuff like that. Like those are things that we are just kind of seeing regularly now. But at the time, it was really cool because, I mean, there weren't any other games on iOS like this. Like this is back in 2011. You know, the iPhone was really just it was big. It was really big, but it wasn't like touchscreen phones still weren't like the standard everywhere at this point. You know, and we were still getting a lot of games like Jelly Car and stuff like that. And whenever this came out on iPhone, it blew me away personally. It was just completely different from everything else that I was seeing. And this, like the focus on music and this whole thing just kind of being like, hey, this is like what the music would have you visualizing if you didn't have the game in front of you. Like that whole idea, it's all very dreamlike to accompany that, I guess. But I think I like that a lot myself. Yeah.
This is packaged as a interactive album, right? I don't know if that's a success. And I don't want to speak to like what it would have been in 2011. I'm not playing the game in 2011. I don't think this game does a good job of interacting with the music in a way that's compelling. If this was an experiment in creating an interactive album, I think it was a failure, because the game itself doesn't really have you interact with the music in a way that I find engaging. You know, like if you told me here is an interactive album where you can play a game, interact, play the game, experience the music in a very like multi-dimensional way, and enjoy it that way, I would not have envisioned this game. This game, Sword and Sorcery EP, could absolutely be reskinned in a way that took away the music focus, and I don't think it would hurt the game, so to speak. Like those aspects, I think, are so tenuous that if you remove them, you actually wouldn't be changing the game all that much. And I think that's really unfortunate. I really wish they kind of would have been more experimental in trying to integrate the music in a way that was more novel, because at the end of the day, I thought, well, the music actually ended up not being that important to the game, the story, what you were doing. So I don't know, that was a bit of a letdown for me.
Yeah, I think naturally we're going to disagree here because we like disagreed on the I guess on like the music belonging in the game. I like I said, I think the music very much elevated this game, and I think it would have been a lesser. I feel very strongly about this, that this would have been a lesser experience without the music. I think that it is very much like these scenes would have been fine, but I think that the idea, like the music, is supposed to be helping channeling the vibe and atmosphere in the game, and I think it is very successful at that. And like also the idea that like this is like a brainchild between Jim Guthrie and Cappy, and like what like more or less they were envisioning this, what playing in your head with this music, that type of thing. I think it is successful in that way. Now, if you're talking, it could have been more of like a rhythm game or something like that. I think in that regard, yeah, you could argue that it did fail, because it's not like you are playing to the beats of the music or anything like that. But I think in terms of like an adventure game, I think it made the most of the music that it could have.
Sure, you're absolutely. It's very interesting that we disagree so much on this. I felt like this entire podcast run we've done, we've been agreeing with each other a lot. I'm so glad that we were able to find something that we feel so strongly in opposite directions with.
Yeah, it all comes down to taste in music. Some of us, like me, have good taste in music, and others like you are harder to pick up on.
I love the music. I just hate the game.
That's okay.
Okay,
Yeah,
I
don't
don't
know.
I don't want to center my dislike of the game. So no, I'm really glad that people felt that this was a good fit.
Yeah. So I guess from there we should actually like talk about the gameplay, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And I was thinking about that. You told me when we started playing this game that it was originally a mobile game, and it has been ported into Steam, which is where I played it. But as you play, you can really tell this was meant to be played with a touchscreen. And I will say, part of what soured me on this game, unfortunately, was at the beginning it was a little hard to figure out how to control the game with a point and click mouse. I'll admit some of that stuff that was told to you at the beginning, I kind of was a little hesitant to like receive fully because I was a little frustrated with the control scheme. But once I got used to it, it actually ended up not being too much of an issue. I warmed up a lot to the gameplay. Now you've played a lot more of these point and click adventure games than I have. How did you feel like the actual controls of the game? Like how good were the controls of the game?
Okay, so I think back again. I'm going to compare and contrast my opinions from 2011 to today. Back whenever I played this originally, I was very much like enveloped in like the world, the atmosphere, whatever was going on. The music. It was just like one of those that like put the headphones on. I would be on like I'd be riding in the passenger seat on the way to work with my dad, which hour and a half drive. It was just a very like kind of meditative experience at the time. Today, having played through it and kind of knowing all the narrative beats and everything that's going on, I gotta say the gameplay has soured a lot in my opinion. This is something that I think I'm gonna agree with you on. One of my biggest complaints about the game is that it's extremely slow. And you never found the Moon Grotto. I don't think we talked about it, but there's a way to progress the game quicker because the game like kind of develops its story points around like moon cycles. Like you're supposed to go there on a new like you're able to get one of the trigon pieces during a new moon and another trigon piece during a full moon. Well, the Moon Grotto allows you to change the cycle of the moon without changing your device's like clock. And it's kind of this cool like metaphysical place. Well, if you play this way, so you load into the area, you walk all the way to the Moon Grotto, which is not a short like jaunt. You have to sit and wait for the moon cycles to change to the moon cycle that you want. Then walk all the way back to Logfellow's hut, go into his dream, and then walk to all the various locations to like do your tasks. And it was painfully slow this time around. Like I actually like because I was playing on my Switch, so I was able to play with the touchscreen functionality. I could be on one side of an area and click on the other side of an area and just wait for my character to walk all the way over there. And I seriously pulled up Twitter while I was waiting for her to walk all that way. It was not as engrossing this time around because they're just the exploration factor wasn't there. And with that being taken into consideration, I think that it is, you do so much of it that I think not having like a move faster button was like a big miss.
Yeah, I found myself doing that too, where I was trying to clearly get through an area very quickly, so I, clicked the end and had to wait for my character to kind of, walk all the way through. And I remember picking up my phone and like, looking at Reddit and trying to do that, and it just really slowed the experience down. So yeah, totally with you on that.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like I get why they made that choice because it's like it's supposed to be meditative. There's a pace that it's setting, and like there are other games that have done this. I feel like more successfully too, but like I definitely think that at a certain point, especially when you're doing repetitive tasks and stuff, that they should allow you to move quicker than you are. Walking in games is not fun.
Right, for sure. Yeah, that would have been nice. We're not talking about now, but the environments were nice to walk through, but the pace did kind of slow down. I did really, I found the combat system very interesting. What do you think about the combat system in the game?
I think it's fine. It's not bad. I don't think it's great. I think it's good. You know, like it's no, fine is good. Good is even too strong of a word for it. I liked how they would tell you how many times they were going to strike you before they would the action would be taken. Like with like the sword and shield guys that you would fight intermittently. I liked the audio visual cues you would get from that, but the actual combat itself is very much like block hits. You know.
Yeah, it's very simple and very clearly not the focus of the game. You know, but it's just a way for you to interact with the world that isn't just walking around and examining stuff.
Yeah.
I found it interesting though, and I kind of wish that they had found ways to explore the combat system a bit more. You know, once I realized that, you know, the extent of like what combat was in the game, I was a little sad that I, you know, didn't get to explore what this system would look like at its fullest. But then again, this isn't an action game; it's an adventure game, and this is just a small part of it. I did think that the fighting the wolf, and I bet the wolf is supposed to be some sort of like thematic story thing that I didn't get. I found the wolf fight to be kind of frustrating because it wasn't clear what I was supposed to be doing during those fights. It wasn't until I was fighting the like ghost skeletons that I understood how the combat was supposed to work. And credit to the Trigon fights; those were actually very cinematic and fun to play once I understood what the play pattern was supposed to be.
Yeah, and you missed out on one of, I guess, really like the most iconic fight in the game, which is where you're fighting the naked bear guy, boar, or whatever it is, you know?
Yeah, for sure. For the listeners who don't know what we're talking about, I'll just go ahead and explain. Jordan already mentioned that there is parts of the game that require you to be at a certain real life moon phase, and that can be changed by going to a special place that allows you to change the end game moon phase. But to do this, you actually have to fight a character, the grizzled boar, which is a really silly character, and it's unfortunate that I didn't get to interact with it as much as I did. And it appears if you go into the dream world on a day that is not one of the natural moon phase days. I don't know if this is intentional or not, but this is what happened to me. If you play for the first time on one of those natural moon phase days, the board does not appear. And then if you fight the second Trigon and then you go back into the world, you cannot trigger the boar again. It soft locks you into waiting naturally until the next moon cycle. Or you can go into your system and change the time, which is what I ended up doing. So yeah. I don't know if it's intentional or not, but you're right. I did miss an integral part of the gameplay, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, so I had never heard of anyone missing that before you told me that, and I looked it up, and sure enough, it's like, it's a thing that can happen. It's rare, but it's like, typically you come across it the first time you come into the dream. It's like but I didn't know that you could skip that entire first time, you know? So it was just, it was wild to me. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know how much more it would have actually added to your enjoyment of the game, but it's just kind of a fun, goofy segment. Okay, dialogue. This is something that you either love it or hate it as far as this game is concerned. I have heard both. What are your thoughts?
Oh yeah, this was my number one thing I hated about this game, and honestly, I would say the dialogue is the number one thing that just made me not want to like this game. It's the word I keep coming back to is cringy. It's just so cringy, and I hate every single sentence that was written in this game. I'm sorry, I'm trying to find the best I can out of this game, but I hate every word that is written into this game. I hate it. I loathe it with a passion.
Okay, you got to go deeper, because so far you've just said you dislike it. I got to hear why. Why is it cringy?
Oh, okay, sure. Well, I think people can understand what I mean when I say cringy. This is, you keep talking about this being a coming out in 2011. This game is very much a product of its time. It's very dated in a way that I wasn't expecting. the outside of the game, the gameplay, the themes, appear to be very serious. The dialogue is not serious. It's memey, and not even in a good way. It's memey in a it's memey in like a 2011 Icahn has cheeseburger, rage comic way. None of the dialogue is that serious. I keep thinking back to this one passage at the very beginning of the game when you click on some gravestones that you find, and it says, so these when you click on the cemetery or the gravestones, it says we found some gravestones on the side of the road, and we wondered what was up with that. Like, that is so incongruent with the serious tone that the rest of the game takes. Here's another screenshot that I took later in the game. We got the peculiar feeling that it was maybe a time of miracles. Where are my miracles at? Like, that is so cringy. I felt there was a huge incongruence with the meminess and like old, like dated meminess of the dialogue versus the serious tone of the rest of the game. I think it was a real mistake to do it that way.
Okay, so two points I want to make here. The first of all, I agree with the fact that it has not aged well. I completely agree with that. I don't think it's funny at all in the modern era. The other thing I will say is I'm going to push back hard on you saying that like you can't have funny dialogue in a serious thing. That is an age old technique in terms of like anachronistic storytelling. It's as simple as like comedic relief. It does not work here because the dialogue's not good. It's not as black as white as that. But yeah, I definitely think there have been, especially like any Wes Anderson work. You can look at many examples of people successfully integrating funny dialogue in very serious situations. This game just failed at it.
Yes, you're right. I will concede to that. It can be done. I do not think that this game did it that much. I got to be honest. As soon as I saw the first unironic "keep calm and carry on" reference, I checked out. I checked out completely. It got to the point where I stopped clicking on things that were clearly meant to be clicked on just because I didn't want to subject myself to the cringy dialogue. So yeah, I hate to say it, but like that really put a damper on everything else that I experienced.
You know what actually crossed my mind while I was playing this was that I used to remember this being so funny. Of course, I would have thought that back then. I was in high school in 2011, and all of these things probably were hilarious back then. But now it's all like, oh God, I feel it. I feel it.
You're absolutely right. It's just dated is what it is. And I guess I don't want to look back at 2011 internet culture and I'm not looking back on that era fondly, unfortunately. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Hated the dialogue. Not much else to say about it.
No, I appreciate you going on that tangent because I felt the same way, and I was wondering where you were going to be at after this. And that's why I asked you to expand on it because it is definitely showing its wear.
Well, to contrast that with what I think is the absolute best part about this game is the art style. It's a very pixel kind of a retro style, and big props to them for not doing like squat, very square characters. I was really appreciative of how lanky and expressive the characters were in this retro pixel style. It really is, to me, the highlight of this game.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think this game is beautiful today. Like, you could release this game with like different story, like a game with this art style today, and people would like praise the hell out of it. It is aged beautifully in terms of its like visuals, and I think a large part of it is how much detail they cram into each of the scenes with the pixel art. Like, you can make out what everything is. It's just that like I don't know. It's hard for me to like quantify. It's like, to me, one of the best examples of just like high detail pixel art that we've seen in games. And I love when games take that like lighting versus pixel art approach like this game did. I don't know. I think it still lands today.
Yeah, art is great. And I think it's a great way because they wanted these characters to be expressive. And I think they do a really great job of having pixel I mean, just like I said, having pixel art that is as expressive as it is. Yeah, yeah. This art style is going to hold over time for a long time. It's unfortunate we can't say the same for the dialogue, but yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Okay, so let's jump into the meat and potatoes, like the real meat of this game, which is themes.
Sure,
I think
absolutely. This is another thing where I'm really going to need you to explain to me what the themes were, because I gotta be honest, I didn't pick up on a lot. So I'm very curious. I know you're a very thoughtful, logical, rational guy. I need you to tell me what themes you took out of this game.
Okay, so I think the most like forefront one was just like depression, anxiety, melancholy. I think that is conveyed even in a lot of the happier music in the game, as well as like the Scythians' like nonchalant, almost like distant dialogue. And again, unfortunately, you missed out on some of the dialogue parts where she expressed like I guess fear or anxiety over her duties. And I think a lot of that is conveyed, and this is where I considered the game a success in terms of its soundtrack, is she's walking kind of shoulders like down, like, slow pace, through, which doesn't work from a gameplay perspective, but I think from a thematic perspective, it does. She's in no hurry to get to her end, and it's like one of those things where it's like, it's all like conveyed well visually and from a sound perspective. And that's like their goal to convey here is like, hey, this, like she refers to it as a woeful errand. You know what I mean? Like this sucks, and she's not happy about it. And I think they do a good job like conveying that through the sound and visuals. But there's one other theme I want to touch on here in a second, but I guess I want to see like if you can pick up on any of that, or how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I can absolutely see where they were going with that. I did read everything that popped up in the Megatome, and I could definitely get that feeling from the main character and how they were feeling about what they were about to do. I hate to keep bringing it up, but the cringy dialogue I think really took away from that.
I understand.
It was hard to take seriously. Like anything serious this game was trying to say was really dampened by the dialogue. But I don't want to harp on it too much. So yeah, that's why I would have to say.
I think that's a good criticism though, because it's like art, it's not its fault that it aged and that it unhinged its humor on internet humor. It's just a result of what's going to happen when you do that. If anyone makes like a lot of these Marvel movies that use a lot of like the memes or like dialogue choices that we make today, probably aren't going to age the best in the future. It's just a result of making that choice.
Oh, I wonder if the people who made this game would cite Wes Anderson as an influence on the way that they approach the themes and storytelling of this game.
It's possible. I definitely not the dialogue, but I think the themes and storytelling would probably like fall into that category. I think Wes Anderson is very like period in most of his dialogue decisions, and he uses like the breaks for like comedic relief. But anyways, it's one of those things where it's like it is on every bit of the stuff related to your story to make sure these themes land. And I think that it's totally like a credible like critique to like look at this and be like, it falls short now because it has aged like poop, in terms of its dialogue, and it's just not conveying that specific theme well. And I think that's fair, man.
Sure, absolutely. And I could definitely see another theme where responsibility of the main character to fulfill the duty of going through there, especially towards the end when she starts vomiting, coughing up whatever fluid, losing the life. I think that's probably the best storytelling that's in the game, as I mentioned before. Like that, you are sending the character to their end, and the way that that's expressed and how you're kind of having to take the brunt of that responsibility by controlling the character and taking them to their death. I could definitely see that being a theme. And I do have to say, like when that really ramps up, the cringy dialogue does kind of take a back seat. So I would have to say, in terms of enjoying like the themes and story, the last session is definitely the strongest part of that for me.
Yeah, I think we can all relate to the Scythian and that our jobs are all slowly killing us.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
Yeah, that's all I got to say about that. I wanted to make that reference because that was something that kept coming up throughout the game. It ties back into the depression, anxiety aspect of things. I don't know if it's an intentional theme whenever they released this, or if that was something they're thinking about. But it's something I just kept feeling and thinking about as I played it. It was just like it's almost like the goal shifts. Like, I'm here on this journey because of my responsibility as a Scythian, but I'm switching to just trying to help these people out as my driving force. Because I think like anyone, like along these types of like really tough tasks, you're probably thinking to yourself, this is bullshit, why am I even doing this? And that's something I was thinking a lot about as I played this.
Sure, yeah,
But
absolutely. Well, to put a cap in it, you really liked this game when it first came out. You mentioned that some things have not aged well, but overall, do you still think that this is a good game? Would you recommend this to people other than me in the year of our Lord 2021?
Yeah, I don't think I can anymore. It's kind of sad. It's one of those things where I look back on it so fondly before I jumped into it, and I think this is a case of going revisiting something that I considered an old classic, and at the time would have told someone was perfect. And it's like time really it really dealt a blow to this game, I felt like. And a lot of it sounds like it should be a small complaint, but walking comprises so much of this, and it is such a drag moving through this game that you want to do other things. And then, like you said, the dialogue just really not it just isn't good. It's a lot for this game to kind of make it past, and it's so obtuse without the social media element factored into it as well. It was such a integral part of it at the time, and the game even acknowledges that right when you started out, at least on the Switch version. It says, hey, we've since learned since 2011 that social media is evil, which was a funny line, and they were like, and we've decided not to keep it in in this cut of the game. And honestly, I do think that hurts the experience. I don't think I would recommend people play it today.
Yeah, fair enough. I wish I could have seen what the Twitter integration really looked at its fullest. I think I did not like this game. It's the last time I'm going to say it, but I think that I can appreciate where this was in gaming history and kind of how this pushed things forward to where we could be to where we're at today. So I can at least thank this game for kind of being a point in time for games that we can, look back to and keep in mind as we look forward.
Yeah, I agree with that. It definitely feels like a stepping stone. It feels like if you go back and play The Legend of Zelda on the NES now, at the time, great game. Today, sorry, it's boring as shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Hey, that's a hot take. We'll definitely have to see what kind of hate mail we get for that comment. I do one last thing about this before we go to quick hits. We mentioned that after watching the Double Fine adventure, I was a little bit more interested in playing the game Broken Age, which is in the same genre of gameplay. And from the timeline that I know of, this game, the game we talked about today, would have come out right when Double Fine was getting ready to do their Kickstarter for another point-and-click adventure game. This game actually makes me want to play Broken Age more because now I want more adventure games to compare this one to. I wonder if I play Broken Age, am I going to have the same complaints? Is it me just not liking the genre, or is it this game specifically? So now I kind of really want to play Broken Age or maybe another well-liked adventure game to kind of see where in this genre are my gripes lying,
Yeah, so I can't tell you how you'll feel about it, honestly. I can only tell you what I felt playing both games. I think that Broken Age does a lot, to me. They do a lot better than this game does from an adventure game perspective. That said, Broken Age has its own host of problems that I think would lead you to not liking that as well. And I don't think either of the game's flaws are a result of being adventure games, because there are some fantastic adventure games that don't have any of the flaws of either of the games. And like a couple that I'll name off are like Thimbleweed Park, which is like a, Twin Peaks slash X-Files-esque game made by Ron Gilbert. That's a recent example of a really good one. And then like Grim Fandango, which I think has aged like wonderfully, especially with the remastered versions that it's had. I think you would have to, I think because the games are so few and far between these days, you would have to look to specific examples to see like the upsides and see then if you don't like the genre.
Sure. One thing about the Double Fine games is that I know they'll be funny. That's one thing that I know will happen. But anyway, let's do some quick hits. What is your, and I'm going to ask you first because I know you probably have a few here. What is your favorite moment overall from this game?
I think for me, it's pretty like just clear. I really like the meeting Jim Guthrie in the woods and him playing a song for you.
That was pretty cool. Yes.
Yeah, I just liked the acknowledgement that you're doing something like pretty heavy and like a small thing that he can do for you is just kind of play you this really good music, and that was by far the thing I remember most in this game.
Yeah, that's a nice moment. I did actually find one for this game for me. I really wish that I could have been in a better mind space in terms of frustration with the game when I came across this point. But when you first take the Megatome and then you start getting chased by the spirit, I found that to be pretty cool. And, had I not been frustrated by the controls at that point, and it not be still in that moment of me learning the controls, that would have been really cool. And it was still pretty cool. So if I look back, that's probably my favorite moment out of the entire game. Like, it was pretty scary, especially not really knowing anything about what I just awoken. That was compelling.
And the music during that segment is great too, like the screaming and the horror movie-esque soundtrack playing there.
I gotta be honest, I don't remember what music was playing during that point because I was just trying my best to get away from the specter. Oh, here's a quick hit just off the top of the head. Do you like the name of the game? Do you feel that this is a good name for the game? Superbrothers Sword and Swocery, with sorcery being spelled a little bit weird, almost like sword. EP.
It's an indie game. I give it a pass for that. It's definitely not a catchy name and not something I would name my game.
I do dislike the game, or I dislike the name as well. I think putting Superbrothers right at the front, like I know that that's like the design firm that like did a lot of the design for the game. Doesn't really make sense for that to be in the title. It's confusing,
clunky
a bit. Yeah. I do like that they said put EP in there to highlight that it's a musical experience, even though I think they kind of fell flat. You thought it was good, but I think the spelling of sorcery is a little cringy. It kind of gets back into that meme dialogue we were talking about, although it is a good indication of what to expect when you get into the game, so I gotta give them props for that.
Okay, I gotta ask, because we both agreed that this is probably the best part of the game, whether or not you agree that it like worked with the game itself, but the music, did you have a favorite track?
I did, absolutely. I do think the art was the best part. The music, the quality of the music as a standalone thing would be the second thing, and I would say my favorite track is the one that plays when you fight the wolf. Not sure what the point of fighting the wolf was, but that like real like kind of driving bass, that I love that track, and that's the one I keep going back to when I listen to this album on Spotify. So fighting the wolf. I think the title of the track is even references the wolf. So whichever track that is, really like that one. What is your favorite track?
Okay, so this is rough. This is a part 1, part 2 thing, because there are great companion songs. One of them did not make the final cut of the game, which is very unfortunate because I think it's so good. But my favorite one that's actually in the game is, to go back to the Jim Guthrie moment, And We Got Older as a title. It's just the song he plays you. It has these layers and like this progression, and it is like kind of lightly optimistic, but also like melancholic. I don't know. It hits a lot of notes for me, and I think it's great.
Yeah, that is a great track.
Yeah, the other song that I think about all the time, and you can't hear it unless you listen to the actual soundtrack for the album, or for the game, which like is upsetting because it's so good. It's called How We Get Old, and it's like it has a lot of the same musical cues as Jim Guthrie's song, but it's a lot more like lighthearted and kind of whimsical. And I don't know. It also has a very like nice progression as well. It's something you'll have to listen to like separate from the game, but it is a product of the game's development, and I have to kind of give it a nod, especially when listening back to back with And We Got Older. You know?
Yeah, absolutely, great picks. I do like the And We Got Older track quite a bit. Basically, if you are all inclined to try this game, listen to the soundtrack. You'll really enjoy it. So yeah, lots of great music in this game.
Okay, well, I think that wraps it up for Superbrothers Sword and Swocery.
Yeah, let's move on. Yeah, let's move on to something a bit different.
Okay, so you have an exhortation for me. Can you lay it on my chest?
My exhortation for next episode is the absolute classic game. I know I say that a lot, but this is actually a classic. Chess.
Okay, which version of chess?
Jordan, have you played a lot of chess in your time?
Yes, I have. I played a lot with my dad back in the day.
Okay. We're going to play a lot this week, too. So we can't play in person, unfortunately. But you may know this website. It is lichess.org. Have you heard of this website?
I haven't. You said live chess?
Live chess. So it's Li chess. And this is like the chess website for chess enthusiasts these days. So for, until our next episode, I want you to make a live chess account. It's all free. You don't have to pay for anything on live chess. But it is fully featured chess with puzzles, ways to like get into queues to play games. So start yourself an account, play some puzzles, play a few games against some other people. Hopefully sometime before the next episode, maybe you and I can get together and play a couple of games real quick. But we're going to talk about chess next episode.
Okay, so you realize this is going to push us. Okay, so this is funny. This is going to push us into some really high level thought, deep analysis of games as like a medium conversation, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm absolutely looking forward to having a very having a conversation about chess's placement inside the modern gaming landscape. And it's having a bit of a resurgence on Twitch, in internet culture. Chess is kind of coming back up, so to speak, and I'm looking forward to talking about that as well.
Oh yeah, looking at the website right now, it has over 124,000 people playing it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's really getting popular in terms of like internet culture. So I want to talk about that as well.
Sounds great. Great exhortation, classic exhortation.
Yeah, the classic, so to speak. But yeah, so that's my exhortation. I think we'll have a lot of fun with it, a lot of good discussion. But let's get into back matter. You seem like you have been busy lately. What have you been getting into lately?
Well, two things. I've talked about The Last Dance several times on the podcast. I finally Go ahead.
This is the Michael Jordan documentary about his time with the Bulls and focusing on like a specific season, right?
Yes. Well, it's actually focused on really his entire career.
Okay.
What it does is it takes, I guess, what at the time is like the modern Jordan era, which is like 97, 98, basically the last year that he's playing with the Chicago Bulls, and it compares a lot of points in that season against basically the entirety of his career with the Bulls. It's a Michael Jordan documentary more than it's just strictly a Bulls documentary, but I like the umbrella that it has because it covers the other pivotal players at that time too, like Scottie Pippen and Dennis Rodman, Steve Kerr, like really big basketball names today, because they all played for the Bulls. And I loved this documentary. Like, burning passion. I was so intrigued by it. I will like dig my heels into the ground again and say that like you do not have to be a sports person to enjoy this documentary. It is fascinating as hell, and it is so like emotional and funny and like and like nostalgic too. Just all these moments in the 90s that you just forget about, But I really loved it, and it sits really high up in the documentary echelon for me.
Yeah, sounds very interesting. Yeah, I'll my interest is piqued, so to speak.
Yeah, it's It's tough because I think it's a fairly new. The people who made the documentary very clearly have a pretty neutral take on Jordan. Like they revere him, but they also like acknowledge the controversial figure that he is. And I really appreciated them like full on like straight up asking him about a lot of that stuff that he probably didn't want to talk about. But yeah, very very good. The other thing,
are you still working on that, or have you finished?
It's done. I finished it. It was fantastic. A+ for me.
Great.
The other thing I play, so I picked up the Mario 3D Land port that came to the Switch recently, or 3D World port, and it comes with like an expansion called Bowser's Fury in it, and I had heard a lot of people praising it. I wish I could say I was busy, but that was like 2.5 hours long or something like that, and I was really sad to see it finish. Maybe 4 hours, something like that, but it was an experimental Mario game. They experimented with like the open world design philosophy for Mario, and it was incredible. And I was the whole reason I'm bringing this up is because I want more of that, because they just did unique new things that they haven't been able to do because of the design philosophies of past Mario games. And it was delightful. I just wish it was longer.
Yeah, definitely sounds fun. You had some great things to say about that before.
Yeah, and now I'll be playing the rest of the main portion with Delaney, and as we get frustrated at each other. What about you? What have you been doing since our last episode?
Yeah. So I've been reading a lot of manga lately, and there is one series that is releasing right now that I'm really into, and it's called "Are You Really Getting Married?" And this is a really sweet. It's a romantic comedy of sorts. Basically, as a high level synopsis, these two adults that work at a travel agency in Japan, they're both like antisocial, kind of not geeky, but kind of not popular. They keep to themselves. They're very quiet, very demure, in different ways. The woman really loves maps, and that's like her main hobby, while the guy is just very kind of a herbivore, as the Japanese would say, and takes care of a cat who takes up all of his time, and that's his hobby. Their travel agency decides to open up a branch in Siberia, and they're going to force one of the people at their branch to go staff that branch. But they decided that they're only going to send single people. They're not going to send anybody that's married. So these two people who like to keep to themselves concoct a plan to pretend that they're married, which they're not. They're not even in a relationship. They barely even know each other. And they think that they can kind of get away with it, but then a hilarity ensues. People start taking it super seriously, and then these two kind of slowly become closer and start thinking about each other more in a romantic way. It's really sweet. It's not finished yet, but it's just a really sweet story, and that's kind of what I'm into these days. But it's just really nice.
Yeah, that sounds very slice of life, very Will.
Yeah, it's very me, isn't it? Just knowing all the other anime and manga that I'm super into. But that's pretty much it. I think we did a good job today. I think we really laid out something great for the listeners today.
Yeah. I do have a question real quick before we wrap things up. Just kind of to your point about that manga and you being into the romance stuff. Just sure. While I have you on the recording, we could probably do a whole episode on this, but I think we need more romance in video games. Personally, like real romance, not just like, hey, you can like, play like this visual novel or play. Not that I have anything against visual novels. It just seems kind of exclusive to that genre almost. Yeah. Or like romance options in like Mass Effect. I think that like a game where the romance is the focal point of the story, I would like to see more of those. I don't know.
Sure, yeah. Well, it makes sense that would be kind of not exclusive, but really focused in the visual novel genre, because romance is a story. And what are visual novels? They're just stories. Other games can have stories, but like the point of a game is to play it. There has to be some sort of gameplay loop. So the question is, how do you create a romance game where the romance is a part of the gameplay loop and not just something that's thrown on top of a different gameplay loop that doesn't involve romance? That's the rub. I mean, dating simulators, that's like the main like go-to way that you put romance into a playable gameplay loop. So it's a really interesting idea, and I definitely think that some people should put more thought into this. Clearly there's some sort of creative way that this can be approached that hasn't been done yet, right?
I would just so the Yakuza approach, like the mini game approach, this, you call this dumb if you want, but like, you could have your cutscenes be like the actual bonding, or maybe the result of like your efforts to romance someone. But like I think like using mini games to kind of cutely convey these things, like they're like batting cage mini games in like Yakuza, but there's also mini games where you're like trying to appease this elderly man who owns a theater by staying awake during his old ass movies. Like just stuff like that. Like I would like someone to just like really kind of go in on like making a less combat focused, more relationship driven thing. Anyways, I've gone way off topic. This doesn't have anything to do with our podcast. It's just on my mind.
No, I definitely think that's a good idea. Let's put that on the back burner. Maybe we could have another discussion about that another time. But I think this is a pretty action packed episode for our listeners today.
Yeah. This is a good one. I think. And like a somewhat contentious episode in terms of opinions, but I think overall it's good material, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, listeners, go ahead and let us know what you thought about this. Are these episodes better when we just agree all the time and we're just praising games and just heaping love on top of them, or do you really enjoy these contentious discussions where we're taking two opposite viewpoints? Please comment, let us know what you think. But with that, I think we should wrap this one up.
Yeah, let's stick a fork in it.
Let's put it in the fridge. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Just Dandies. It really means a lot to us every single time. You can follow Jordan on Twitter if you'd like, at Action Pancake. He's a really good follow. I really appreciate the stuff that he puts on there. I'm at Aggro Rhetoric on Twitter. And we would love it if you would follow along with our exhortations and stay up to date on all the latest Disc Dandies excitement at Disc Dandies Pod. Join us here next episode for another spin with the Disc Dandies.